T minus 10, 9, 8.
The clock is
7.
operating. We're underway.
Tranquility Base here. Endeavor, go as run left.
Control NASA 846. LCPLT, I think NASA 846 was calling you.
And NASA 846 is LC.
Looks like it's coming up on 1220. Can you give me a quick time check?
Yep, stand by. I'll give you a hack at, I'll give you a time hack at 12:20. And it's 10 seconds. 3, 2, 1, hack.
Copy.
And this is the NLM on the NLM net with our ready for OCA takeoff pole. T.
TC go.
MIM is go.
SMA.
SMA is go.
SMD.
SMD is go.
M.
NASA advisory team is ready.
Copy that. The team is ready for takeoff.
And payload LPO LC copies. We'll go ahead and check 116 Alpha complete.
This is Pegasus Launch Control at launch minus 1 hour, 4 minutes, 50 seconds and counting. AIM is an acronym meaning Aeronomy of Ice in the Mesosphere. Its 3 instruments on the satellite will study unusual clouds located at the edge of space, approximately 50 miles above the Earth's surface. Researchers know very little about these so-called noctilucent clouds. They have traditionally been observed in the Earth's polar regions, but it's not understood why they are now being seen at lower latitudes, or why these clouds have recently grown brighter and more frequent. It's possible these clouds may be another long-term indicator of global climate change. Clouds can be seen from the ground only at night when they are illuminated by sunlight that is no longer visible from the Earth's surface, which is why they are called noctilucent. The AIM spacecraft weighs 437 pounds and is a 3-axis gyro-stabilized spacecraft. It contains 3 science instruments powered by 6 solar panels, 3 on each of 2 solar arrays. These will provide the 216 watts of power consumed by the spacecraft over its 2-year mission. And will be launched into a 350-mile high polar orbit at an inclination of 97.7 degrees for its 2-year mission. At launch minus 1 hour, 3 minutes, 27 seconds and counting, this is Pegasus Launch Control.
And launch team, this is LC on countdown net with the status. Currently complete all steps through step 116 alpha. We're at the pre-takeoff checklist at this time. And LPO, this is LC on mission freak, step 117. You go start instrument recorder and video recorder.
LC, LPO, recorders on.
And LPO, LC copies, check 117 complete, and LPO, your go to decrease AACS flow rate to 100 SCFM.
LC, LPO, that's in work. LC, LPO, AACS flow rate decreased for takeoff.
And LPO, LC mission freak, I copy that. We'll go ahead and check 118 complete. And launch team, this is LC on mission freak and countdown at step 119. Target takeoff time for today's operation will be 19:28:00 UTC. That's 19:28:00 UTC. Launch window is go for takeoff. Check 119. And launch team, this is LC on the countdown net. At this time, I'd like to perform the ground launch team ready for takeoff pole. OD?
OD, go pending, area clearance.
Okay, OD, I understand. Peg?
Thanks, go.
Peg is go. Orbital?
Orbital is go.
Orbital is go. NLM?
NLM's go.
NLM is go. And Spacelift Commander?
Spacelift Commander repeats that it's go pending based on area clearance.
Okay, I copy that. The Spacelift Commander is go pending. And launch team, this is LC on countdown net. Launch team is go for takeoff. Launch team is go for takeoff. And launch team, flight crew, this is LC on mission freak. Launch team is go for takeoff. PLT confirmed.
C, PLT, confirm we are cleared for takeoff.
And LC copies. We'll go ahead and check step 120 complete.
LC, LPO, wheels up.
And LPO, LC copies. Wheels up, check 121 complete. That completes the pre-takeoff checklist. And LPO, LC on mission freak, be advised, we'll be requesting a AACS set point adjustment to 8.4 degrees.
And I copied 8.4 degrees for step 122.
That's a good copy, LPO, LC out.
This is Pegasus Launch Control at launch minus 57 minutes, 15 seconds and counting. Wheels up on the L-1011, exactly 12:28 on time, on schedule. We are now looking at the F-18 chase plane, which will be departing very shortly. This has the chase plane camera through which we will be able to follow the L-1011 out to the drop box and the final checkout of the rocket before the launch. At launch minus 56 minutes, 36 seconds and counting, this is Pegasus Launch Control.
And LPO LC Mission Freak.
LC, LPO, Mission Freak.
And LPO, your go for step 122 and step 123. Adjust AACS set point to 84 degrees. Increase AACS flow rate to 240 SCFM.
LC, LPO, those two steps are in work. LC, LPO, steps 122 and 123 are complete.
And LPO LC copies, check 122 and 123. And RCO, this is LC on countdown net, step 124, verify C-band operation, continuing nominal.
LC, RCO here, C-band operation, nominal.
And RCO LC copies, check 124 complete.
This is Pegasus Launch Control. We're here in the Mission Directors Center with the AIM spacecraft project manager from the Laboratory of Atmospheric and Space Physics at the University of Colorado at Boulder. Mike, welcome. First of all, tell me real briefly, what is the University of Colorado and LASP role in the mission?
LASP, the Laboratory for Atmospheric and Space Physics, is a partner in the mission supporting Hampton University, who has the principal investigator. Our role on the mission has been to provide project management, system engineering, and mission assurance. We have the Mission Operations Center in our facility, and we also built 2 of the 3 instruments that are on board the payload.
So does this mean after spacecraft separation from the rocket, is Boulder where you'll be getting that confirmation?
Exactly. Boulder is where the information comes back to, and from that facility we distribute science information to each of the science operations centers.
All right, we're going to look at a tape now of some of the AIM processing here at Vandenberg when it arrived, and if you could just kind of tell us what it is that we're seeing.
The spacecraft is shown here. Phil Burkholder is the fellow pushing the box, and Phil has been a driving force behind the integration of the hardware back at orbital. Flight hardware is treated appropriately here at Vandenberg with a number of safety and precaution checks. Each morning a safety briefing takes place, as you just saw. What we're about to see is the spacecraft being removed from the travel canister. That canister is specially controlled from a temperature, humidity, and particulate standpoint, so that the spacecraft arrives here as pristine as it was when it was shipped out of the facility back east. This is the spacecraft being tested. We used dry nitrogen, and that was the flow setup. Solar arrays are being deployed, and we'll see a check of the solar arrays to make sure that they're producing power after the shipment here. We use halogen lamps to create or simulate the sun to create a power source. Telemetry is checked both here at Vandenberg and also back at the Mission Operations Facility to ensure that we have good communication. All of the work is done in a Class 10,000 clean room to assure that the payload, as it was being built and constructed, remains as pristine here as it was back in the previous facility. Spacecraft is hexagonal shaped, as you can see, 6 solar arrays that deploy in a wing. The spacecraft flies in a nadir orientation over the Earth. Communications out here were excellent. This is a test of the door mechanism on one of the instruments where everybody at all stages is fully informed. Here's a check of the separation system, and particularly the cleanliness of that part, since it was integrated late in the process out here at Vandenberg. Integration of the spacecraft to the separation system was a tedious process. We required that the spacecraft remain covered, as you can see, and that elements protrude below the base of the spacecraft, requiring people to assure that as the mate went together, that the matching parts met without difficulty. This part of the process was observed by a number of people, required quite a bit of coordination between Vandenberg, Orbital, LASP, Space Dynamics Laboratory staff, and was carried out very successfully. At this stage, the ground support equipment that rotates the spacecraft is being assembled to the spacecraft itself, and that structure will be used to transport the spacecraft and also to rotate it horizontally to mate up with the Pegasus in a horizontal orientation. Tim Gordon on the right was our contamination lead, and at each step of the way he assured that we were taking appropriate precautions in terms of handling the hardware. The support table was being moved away at that point, and what we're doing now is readying the spacecraft to go into the clean tent. Support again standing by to help with the mating of the structure, and the structure itself then wheeled into the tent, at which time all of the outside wrapping will be removed, and the spacecraft undergo a complete check, and things checked out very well.
So then after that checkout in the clean room tent, is it ready to be mated to the rocket at that point?
At that point it proceeded to be mated to the rocket, and over the course of a month we took the appropriate steps to assure that all of the mating and attachment to the Pegasus were done well, and that everything was put together as planned.
How long have you been here at Vandenberg since the spacecraft arrived?
The team's been here. Today is the 49th day of the integration. We arrived on March 8th, and based on what we see so far during the launch sequence, perhaps today will be the last day that we'll be here.
I'm sure you felt very happy to see the L-1011 on a takeoff roll.
Absolutely.
The spacecraft itself, I mean, it looks fairly substantial, but it's not really very heavy, is it? About how much does it weigh?
Spacecraft weighs 200 kilograms. The instrument payload part of that is about 45 kilograms. So it's from spacecraft sense would be called a small spacecraft, and fits into the small Explorer payload line of satellites.
That's actually, what, a little over 400 pounds, I guess.
Right, a little over 400 pounds, yeah.
Well, we certainly wish you the best of luck once you're on orbit. It's been said around here, the solar rays can't do the job until the sun starts shining on them.
Exactly right, yes.
That's coming up very shortly. So
exactly.
Thank you very much, Mike McGrath, the AIM project manager from the University of Colorado at Boulder.
Thanks, George.
We're now at 44 minutes 7 seconds until the drop of the Pegasus from the L-1011. This is Pegasus Launch Control.
CLT abnormal 10, mission.
And launch team, this is Elsie on countdown net with DAS for complete all steps through step 126 alpha of the climb cruise checklist. We've got a report from the plane passing waypoint P climb and heading north towards waypoint P power. Expect that to occur in approximately 9 minutes. And at this time, voice communications.
This is Pegasus Launch Control at launch minus 40 minutes, 18 seconds, and counting. With us here in the Mission Director Center is Ron Mueller. He is the Kennedy Space Center Mission Manager for the AIM project. Ron, when does a KSC Mission Manager begin to get involved in a mission like AIM?
George, typically the mission manager from the Launch Services Program gets involved about 3 to 5 years prior to launch. At that time, we start to work with the spacecraft projects to understand their requirements and integrate them to the launch vehicle.
And so is that the primary role of a KSC mission manager, is integration between rocket and spacecraft?
Yes, at that time we start to understand the requirements for the launch and the design of the spacecraft. There's an entire team of folks at Kennedy Space Center and Launch Services Program to help do that work.
Well, Ron, we have a tape now that shows a lot of the work that's been going on with the Pegasus rocket to prepare it for launch, and the AIM spacecraft, and doing just what you're talking about, mating it to the launch vehicle and the fairing installation. So we'll roll that, and Ron, if you could kind of talk us through what we're seeing.
Sure. Okay, here's the building 1555 at Vandenberg Air Force Base, and inside is where the Pegasus launch vehicle is processed. What you see here are the orbital sciences technicians working meticulously to integrate the different stages of the launch vehicle and check out the various systems to ensure that they're ready for launch. As you can see, the work is on all parts of the launch vehicle. Here you can see the vehicle, the entire vehicle in the bay. The unique thing about the Pegasus launch vehicle is the wing you saw in that previous shot. That shot there was the stage 1 and 2 integration work going on. Again, very slow and meticulous. Care needs to be taken that nothing is damaged as the stages are mated. And along the way, all the systems will be checked out and verified that they work. Here's some of the engineering and technician checkout of the systems. We'll go through an entire flight sim where we'll see the control surfaces move. Those will be monitored, and data will be reviewed to verify that they all worked according to design. Visual inspections will be performed also. Again, the data will be reviewed through the entire phase from ignition to spacecraft separation. And here you can see the spacecraft in the clean tent in building 1555, just prior to integration to the launch vehicle. The clean tent is to maintain the environment for the spacecraft, and you can see the handling fixture, which the spacecraft is mounted to roll it up to the launch vehicle. This is the actual footage of the mating of the spacecraft to the Pegasus launch vehicle. And the white structure around it is handling fixture only. Once the spacecraft is securely mated to Pegasus, that fixture will be detached and rolled away from the spacecraft. And again, a shot from the spacecraft down through the third stage, the second stage, and the first stage of the Pegasus launch vehicle. And here's that shot of the structure being moved away from the spacecraft. And there we have the entire spacecraft supported by the launch vehicle. Special care is taken to maintain the cleanliness inside the launch vehicle. Here you see one half of the fairing being inspected with a black light for contamination, very thoroughly documented and recorded. Care is taken to move that fairing around the spacecraft. The other half of the fairing is inspected, and when it's been determined that that fairing half is clean, again well documented, then the other half of the fairing can be mated to fully encapsulate the spacecraft. At that point, there will no longer be full access to the spacecraft, but they will have some access as required through a door in the fairing, as well as some launch vehicle access through some doors in the fairing. Again, a very slow and meticulous process. And there we have the encapsulated spacecraft on the Pegasus launch vehicle. After all the processing in 1555 is complete, the launch vehicle will be rolled out to mate with the L-1011 aircraft. So here we see the ground support equipment that pulls that vehicle out. Typically rolled out in early morning. Past the gate at building 1555 around to the runway at Vandenberg Air Force Base, where the L-1011 awaits. And that launch vehicle is about 57 feet long, weighs about 50,000 pounds. And here we see the Pegasus launch vehicle approaching the L-1011. As you notice, the L-1011 is up on jacks to allow for more room underneath the aircraft so that the rocket can safely fit underneath. You'll also note that the upper control surface is not yet installed on the Pegasus rocket.
Meaning the fin?
Yes. Because of the close quarters, it will be installed, pulled up into the cavity in the L-1011 and then connected to the rocket as it's put in place under the L-1011. And you can see the mission logos and supporting organization logos on the side of the launch vehicle. Here's the activity with the tail, the control surface. Again, every step of the way needs to be thoroughly documented and recorded to ensure that's properly implemented. Checkouts are done of the system to ensure they've been installed properly. The visual inspections performed. And here you saw the hooks on the L-1011 that hoist the Pegasus rocket up and secure it underneath. And with that, after we get all the processing done, the launch vehicle sits there with the final preparations ready to go before launch.
Any idea about most of what we saw there occupied about what space of time?
Well, overall, the spacecraft typically arrives between, I'd say approximately 60 days prior to launch, and it starts its processing here at 1555 while the vehicle is processing in parallel. And then all that activity is spaced out in between until we get to those final steps.
So it's really much of what we saw was in just the last few months?
Correct. And as we spoke at the beginning, there's years prior to that we've actually started the integration work. Working with the entire team and different organizations between the NASA Launch Services Program, Orbital Science Corporation, and all of the spacecraft organizations.
Well, Ron, thank you very much. I think we're about a half an hour at the end of that trail.
You bet, George, and we're ready for a good launch.
Thanks very much. Ron Mueller, the Kennedy Space Center Mission Manager.
Thank you.
And we're at launch minus 31 minutes, 43 seconds and counting. This is Pegasus Launch Control.
launch team, this is LC on Countdown Net with the status. We're complete all steps through 129. Climb cruise checklist now complete. Currently at step 130, Pegasus internal power checklist. Expect to be launched at approximately L-26 minutes. That's L-26 minutes. And that will be an approximate UTC time of 20:00:00.
This is Pegasus Launch Control at launch minus 28 minutes, 33 seconds and counting. With us now is Jim Russell, who is the AIM Principal Investigator for Hampton University. Welcome, Jim, and first of all, tell us what Hampton's University, what their university role primarily is with AIM.
Hampton University is the prime contractor for this mission. We have responsibility for the entire mission, including all the instruments, the satellite, and interfacing with the launch vehicle. And of course we also have the project data center, which will be the center where all the data will flow to and available to the community. And in addition to that, the main web point for interfacing all the information from the mission will be at Hampton University. And in addition to that, we're coordinating the science for the mission, and we'll be leading the data reduction.
Well, can you tell us real briefly why AIM is so important, particularly right now?
The reason that AIM is important is that we see changes occurring in the atmosphere that we don't understand. We see these noctilucent clouds that we are studying with this mission that are increasing in frequency. They are getting brighter, and they're seen at lower latitudes than ever before. And we need to understand this. We need to know why it's happening and what the relation is to global change and to what we're doing to our atmosphere.
We have some animation now that will go into some of what AIM is going to do. So if we could roll that, and Jim, if you could tell us what we're seeing as we go along.
What we're seeing here is the reason we call these clouds noctilucent or night shining. The clouds are very high, 50 miles above the Earth's surface, and so when the sun sets below the horizon and someone is standing in darkness, they'll still see these very bright, shiny, iridescent clouds because they are so high up above the Earth's surface. What we're seeing in this video, of course, is the Pegasus being dropped from the Lockheed 1011 aircraft going on its way into orbit. It's now, you're seeing the first stage burnout, second stage ignition. Very soon here we'll see the second stage separation and third stage ignition. There goes the fairing coming off, exposing the AIM satellite. You see the solar rays wrapped around the satellite as it passes by. Stage 2 burnout, and then soon we'll have stage 3 ignition to carry the payload the rest of the way into its final orbit of 600 kilometers above the Earth's surface. We'll be going into polar orbit with this mission, in order to be able to cover the high latitude region. So there we have separation of the third stage. The Ames spacecraft on the top is one of the instruments. Now we're going to see shortly here the solar panels unfurl. There's the first stage of the process. There goes the second and shortly the third stage, where the solar arrays will be deployed, and then the last step will be to tilt them about 34 degrees to be in the best position to view the sun. Here we now see the spacecraft coming around the Earth, coming into view here. As you can see, they're now in their tilted position for the best position with respect to the sun. And at this point, you can see the instruments below. One looks at the sun. One looks at, takes very high-resolution pictures below the spacecraft, and one above, which is measuring dust coming in. And this shows the three instruments. This is the CIPS, Cloud Imaging and Particle Size Experiment. 4 cameras, very high-resolution cameras. Next is a SOFI, Solar Occultation for Ice Experiment. It looks at the sun to get its information. And then the third on the top is a Cosmic Dust Experiment. Those rectangles you see are dust particle counters. Here we see some very beautiful photographs of these clouds, and you can see not only they're important scientifically, but you can see what they are to the eye. Very much variable, a lot of information in them about the dynamics of the atmosphere, clearly a lot of water vapor, and you can see some of the reasons why these clouds capture the imagination of anyone who views them. This is a photograph taken by astronaut Don Pettit, who's a space station science officer. He took it from the space station. Here's another ground shot taken by ground observers. And then here's another very beautiful image that you can see where it looks like they're flowing from this mountain, but they're not, of course.
And again, these clouds are how high up?
50 miles.
50 miles. Those clouds are, below 50,000 feet, so they're very high.
Yes.
There's launching as we are right now in April. Is there a time frame coming up that's particularly important to get some observations about the noctilucent cloud?
Yes, the cloud season begins around mid-May and it goes till mid-August in the northern hemisphere, and mid-November to mid-March in the southern hemisphere. So we're launching at a very good time to observe this season, this summer season here in the north.
And then let's see, how long is the mission, your total number of...
The mission is funded for 2 years. We're in a 600-kilometer orbit, so the satellite will remain there for 10 or 11 years. So we'll be petitioning NASA very soon after launch, once we know everything is working, to grant us an extended mission beyond the 2 years.
Well, Jim, thank you very much, and of course I'm sure you'll be very happy when you see the Pegasus drop from that aircraft. Everybody will be holding the breath for 10 minutes, but then you're going to be knowing things fairly shortly after separation how the spacecraft is that right?
Yes, we'll very quickly. Just seconds after spacecraft separation, there are brake wires that break, and they then turn on the transceiver on the satellite. We have the tracking and data relay satellite system connection up and running and ready for us, so we'll immediately begin transmitting. The solar arrays will deploy in 20 minutes or so, so we'll know very quickly when it comes around to the ascending node into the daylight on the daylight side of the orbit. Then we'll know that it's tracking the sun. So in very short order, in less than an orbit, we'll know what the shape of the spacecraft is.
Well, Jim, thank you very much, and best of luck over the next 2 years and hopefully longer.
Thank you very much, George.
At 21 minutes now before the launch of the Pegasus rocket with the Ames spacecraft, this is Pegasus Launch Control.
LC, PLT, passing P, turn on my mark. 3, 2, 1, mark.
And PLT, LC copies, waypoint P turn. We'll go ahead and check 132 complete. And payload LPO, this is LC on backup mission freak. Step 132 Alpha, you go to adjust spacecraft direct power supply to 4 amps, and SAS-1 and SAS-2 to 2 amps each for ASC sequence 6.
LC, payload LPO, ASC sequence 6 and work. LC, payload LPO, ASC sequence 6 complete. DPS volts 33.98, 1.64 amps. SAS-1 24.9 volts, 2 amps. SAS-2 25 volts, 2 amps.
And payload LPO, LC copies. We'll go ahead and check 132 Alpha complete.
This is Pegasus Launch Control at launch minus 17 minutes 48 seconds and counting. We're looking at a graphic image of the racetrack pattern that the L-1011 is going to be entering very shortly. It's once it leaves Vandenberg and then begins to head toward the launch box, it's at a speed of about 250 knots initially, and then from the point where it begins to turn toward the northwest, it gradually accelerates its speed up to around 500 knots. And it will be going directly over the drop point before it makes a right-hand turn, goes toward the northeast, and then makes a gradual left-hand procedure turn lining up on the launch heading, taking it over the drop box at precisely 1:26 this afternoon. We're listening to the voices of our NASA and Orbital Sciences launch team. Our primary voice is Adam Lewis, who is the launch conductor from Orbital Sciences Corporation. He is talking with launch panel operator Jim Stowers on board the aircraft, and also with our captain Bill Weaver and our co-pilot Don Moore.
And LCPLP passing 10 on my mark. 3,
And we'll occasionally
1, mark.
hear references to PEG, which is, after we launch, the person from who we will hear the plus count after the Pegasus drops, we'll hear him call the flight events from here in the Launch Vehicle Data Center.
LC, LPO, step 134 is in work.
So at this time, we continue to be on time and on track for the launch of AIM on the Pegasus XL at 1:26 Pacific time this afternoon. At 15 minutes 15 seconds and counting, this is Pegasus Launch Control.
LC, LPO, step 135 is in work. LPO, release mechanism is armed.
And LC copies. Go ahead and check 135 complete. PLT, LC, confirm release arm.
LC, PLT, I can confirm we have release arm.
And LC copies. Check 136 complete. And payload LPO, LC, step 136 alpha. You go to transition spacecraft to internal power for ASC sequence 8.
Payload LPO, ASC sequence 8 in work.
And launch team
LC, payload LPO, ASC sequence 8 complete.
LC copies, payload LPO, check 136 alpha complete.
This is
And
Pegasus Launch
team
Control.
LPO countdown. At this time, I'd like to perform launch team ready for Pegasus to FTS internal power pole.
At launch minus 13 minutes, 27 seconds and counting. Right now, our launch conductor Adam Lewis is polling the team for transfer to internal power. We've also been hearing the payload launch panel operator Fred First conducting checks of the AIM spacecraft. In just a couple of minutes, when we get to launch minus 8 minutes, we'll hear a call from the launch weather officer, Captain Damon Voorhees from the 30th Weather Squadron, that we're ready weather-wise for the launch. And that kicks off the readiness for a final check over the following 4 minutes that we're ready to launch. The terminal countdown will begin at launch minus 4 minutes. And when we get to launch minus 90 seconds, the fin batteries will be activated. That means that there will be a steering check of the flight controls of the Pegasus rocket, which we should be able to see, leading us up to
FTS
a
on
drop
internal
at
power.
126.
And LC copy, check 139 complete, and PEG, note FTS voltage occurrence.
So our next
PEG, LC,
significant activity is going to be the call from the launch weather officer on the forecast, leading us into our readiness sequence, and then picking up the terminal count at T-minus 4 minutes. At T-minus 12 minutes and counting, this is Pegasus Launch Control.
MIPCO is go. PEG?
Thanks, go.
PEG is go. LPO, LC, backup mission, poll for FTS checks.
LPO is go.
LPO is go. Launch team go for FTS checks. Check 141 complete. MIPCO, LC, step 142, send arm command. Continue monitor tone 4 when function removed.
Arm on my mark. 3, 2, 1, mark. Function removed. Monitor tone 4 continued.
And LC copies, MIPCO, check 142 complete.
LC, this PEG, FTS checks nominal.
LC copies, check 143 complete. MIPCO, LC, step 144, verify FTS checks nominal.
FTS checks nominal.
And LC copies, check 144 complete. And flight crew LC on backup mission. FTS checks are now complete. Check 145 complete. PLT, your go for step 146. Power off anti-collision light.
Roger, LC, PLT, step 146 is complete.
And LC copy, check 146 complete. And PLT LC, backup mission for a voice check.
Unclear, PLT. Here, LC, this is PLT.
Loud and clear as well.
And LC, PLT, we're passing PIP on my mark. 3, 2, 1, mark.
And PLT, LC copy, check 147 complete, and I can verify launch window is go. Launch window is go. Team LC on countdown net, launch window is go, check 148 complete. LWO, LC, countdown, step 149, confirm weather status.
LC, LO, weather is green.
And LC copy, check 149 complete. And PEG, LC, step 150, report readiness for internal power.
This is PEG, go for avionics internal power.
And LC copy, check 150 complete. And LPO, LC, backup mission, step 151, your go for avionics to internal power.
LPO, avionics to internal on my mark. 3, 2, 1, mark. Avionics external power supply is off.
And all stations on the NLM net, this is the NLM with our final launch readiness poll. Launch vehicle, spacecraft, and range are reporting green. ECE.
EC is go.
MEM.
MIM is go.
SMA.
SMA is go.
SMD.
SMD is go.
NAM.
NASA advisory team is ready.
NASA, AIM, and Brioni are ready for launch.
Roger, copy 384, decimal 85.
That's a good copy.
Past L-minus 7, 3, 2, 1, mark.
And PLT, I copy passing L-7, check 154 complete. Taylor LPO, LC, your go for step 154 alpha, discontinued soft right isolator heater.
This is Pegasus Launch Control at launch minus 6 minutes, 35 seconds and counting. We've completed checks of the flight termination system, and the weather is reported go for launch by the launch weather officer. We're about to
This is the ROC on
hear
countdown
the
net.
final
Range is green.
poll by the launch team. NASA launch manager Omar Baez has given NASA's go to proceed. Once ignition occurs, we'll be tracking through the NASA and Air Force tracking stations here at Vandenberg for about 8 minutes, and then the tracking data relay satellite will pick up the AIM spacecraft after separation about 10 minutes and 11 seconds after drop. Acquisition through TGIS occurs about a minute later. At launch minus 5 minutes, 44 seconds and counting, this is Pegasus Launch Control.
L-minus 5 minutes. 3, 2, 1, mark.
And I copy that, PLT. We'll go ahead and check 158 complete. And launch team LC on countdown. At this time, I'd like to perform the final launch readiness poll. OD?
OD, go.
OD is go. PEG?
Thanks, go.
PEG is go. Orbital?
Orbital is go.
Orbital is go. NLM?
NLM is go.
NLM is go. Spacelift Commander?
Spacelift Commander, clear to proceed.
And Spacelift Commander is clear to proceed.
Correction, clear to launch.
Spacelift Commander is clear to launch. Launch team is go to proceed with final checklist at L-4. Check 159. Launch team is go to proceed with final checklist at L-4, check 159.
L-4. 3, 2, 1, mark.
And LC copies, check 160 complete. I can verify launch window is go. Launch window is go, check 161.
LC is Peg, go for transient power.
LC copies, check 162 complete.
This is ROC on countdown net. L1011 in the drop box.
LC, step 163, you go to apply transient bus power.
LC, LPO, transient power on.
LC copy, check 163.
LC, this is Peg, transient power on and nominal.
LC copies, check 164 complete. PEG LC 165. Confirm ready to configure SIGI for flight.
LC is Peg, go to configure SIGI for flight.
And LC copies, check 165 complete.
L-3, 3, 2, 1, mark.
And PLC, LC copies, L-3. And LPO, did you copy 166?
Negative, 166 is at work. LC, LPO, sub 166 is complete.
LC copies, check 166. Your call on 167.
LC is Peg, SIGI configured for flight.
And PEG LC copies, check 167 complete. And LPO, you go for 168, switch flight computer console program to LPO menu.
168 at work. -2, 3, 2, 1, mark.
And PLT, I copy L-2, check 170, and your go to acquire launch heading at 177.5 magnetic. LC copy, check 171. LPO LC, come back on 168.
LC, LPO, sub 168 is complete.
LC copy, check 168 complete.
L-1. 3, 2, 1, mark.
LC copies L-1, check 172. LPO, you go to activate SIM battery at L-45.
LPO copy. SIM battery on my mark. 3, 2, 1, mark. Starboard down. Port down. Bent rudder down. Bent sweep.
LCL, Peg is go for launch.
LC is go for launch. PLT confirm.
Confirm, go for launch.
Coming up now in 10 seconds. 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Go for drop. Pegasus is away. And ignition of the Pegasus rocket with the AIM spacecraft for clues about the mystery of the Earth's highest clouds at the edge of space.
Attitude nominal. Vehicle is now pitched up at 35 degrees and traveling over 1,500 miles per hour. Attitude nominal. Max Q attitude remains nominal as the vehicle passes through the period of maximum aerodynamic pressure. The vehicle fin actuator system, which is used to control the vehicle attitude during stage 1 burn, is performing properly. Vehicle power buses remain strong with nominal voltage and current on all buses. Vehicle has passed 100,000 feet in altitude and traveling at 3,000 miles per hour. And maximum aerodynamic heating. Attitude remains nominal. Stage 1 burnout. Expecting stage 2 ignition in approximately 15 seconds. Stage 2 TVC battery on. Voltage, currents, and status nominal. Stage 2 ignition. And stage 1 separation. Attitude nominal. Power buses nominal. Stage burn will last approximately 70 seconds. Vehicles pass 50 miles in altitude. All systems remain nominal. Two minutes into the AIM mission, all systems nominal. Fairing separation. Vehicle attitude is nominal following jettison of the payload fairing. Power buses are nominal. Stage 2 nozzle thrust vector control system and vehicle reaction control system are operating nominally and controlling vehicle attitude. Attitude is nominal. GPS is on stage 3. The SIGI-GEM has a required GPS and is in state 5 op, following a switch to stage 3 antennas. Spacecraft stage 2 burnout, vehicle attitude nominal. Now in stage 2-3 coast phase. Spacecraft has reported indications of sun affecting their solar rays and power to their batteries. S-band switch to stage 3. During this coast phase, the Pegasus vehicle is coasting to an orbit insertion altitude of approximately 373 miles or 600 kilometers. Coast period will last approximately 2 minutes.
We've been listening to the Pegasus flight engineer Rick Hankey confirming the flight events of the Pegasus rocket. We had visuals from the chase plane, the F-18 chase plane, and then also through Santa Ynez Peak, an infrared picture. And at this time all of the events are going well. Our next event will be the stage 2-3 separation at 6 minutes 50 seconds into the flight. The pilot from the chase plane reports that it looked to him like a very good clean drop and a good clean launch. So at this time we'll continue to listen to Rick Hankey with the status of the vehicle from the Launch Vehicle Data Center and our telemetry lab here at Vandenberg Air Force Base.
Power bus is strong, attitude nominal. All systems nominal. Vehicle power bus is still strong. Attitude nominal. All systems nominal. Power bus is strong. Reorientation maneuver for stage 3 burn has started. Attitude's nominal. Approximately 1 minute to stage 3 ignition. All systems remain nominal. Power buses and attitude nominal. Stage 3 TVC battery is on. Good volt, good current, good status. Stage 2 set. And stage 3 ignition. Vehicle attitude nominal, power bus is nominal. Stage 3 burn will last approximately 70 seconds. Stage 3 TVC operating nominally, all power buses strong. Attitude nominal. Approximately 7.5 minutes into the aim mission, vehicle velocity is over 12,000 miles per hour, an altitude of over 360 miles. Attitude remains nominal. Stage 3 TVC system nominal. Attitude nominal. Pegasus power bus nominal. Attitude nominal. Vehicle is in orbit. Preliminary data shows the orbit to be nominal. Actual values were reported following payload set. Vehicle is reorienting in preparation for payload separation. Attitude nominal. All power buses strong. Attitude nominal, power bus is nominal. Approximately 9 minutes into the AIM mission, vehicle velocity is over 17,000 miles per hour at an altitude of approximately 373 miles or 600 kilometers. Attitude is still nominal. Approximately 1 minute until payload separation. Transient bus remains strong, ready for payload set. Attitude is nominal. Approximately 20 seconds from payload set. Approximately 10 seconds to payload set. Payload separation. The AIM spacecraft has separated from the Pegasus launch vehicle. The Pegasus vehicle is now performing contamination collision avoidance maneuvers. Calculation of the insertion state vector for the AIM spacecraft is in work.
LC ground ops on Countdown Prime.
Go ground ops.
Assist.
This is Pegasus Launch Control, 11 minutes, 7 seconds into the flight of the AIM spacecraft. We've had spacecraft separation. The orbit is now being confirmed. The orbit appears to be right on the money. The inclination is definitely right on. And hopefully we'll be acquiring AIM through TDRS. AIM has got over the horizon from the NASA and Air Force tracking stations here at Vandenberg. So our next data will be through TDRS from the spacecraft. And as soon as we have that, we'll pass that along to you, or we'll be having our launch director, Omar Baez, come back and talk to us about the launch, and he hopefully will be able to convey that we've had contact with the AIM spacecraft. At a mission lifetimes of 12 minutes, 15 seconds. This is Pegasus Launch Control.
Copy that. And PLT, do you have ETA for landing site back at Vandenberg?
Roger. We're going to have to swing out to the ILS, so it'll probably be about 15 minutes from now.
Okay, copy that. About 15 minutes ETA for wheels down.
The earlier reported values for the insertion, non-insertion, inclination, and MLT were within tenths of sigmas from the nominal values.
This is systems on countdown.
Go systems.
So I just wanted to let you know that we have sent out the state vector following spacecraft SEP and have personally talked to the folks at Goddard FDF. They have it and are processing it.
Okay, that's good news, systems. Copy that.
LC ground ops on Countdown. LC ground, ops on countdown.
Peg on the countdown net. AIM spacecraft telemetry is being received by NASA's TDRS system, and it appears that the AIM spacecraft is initializing properly. First ground contact with the AIM spacecraft is expected in approximately 1 hour and 6 minutes as it passes over the Svalbard ground station in Norway.
This is Pegasus Control at 16 minutes 48 seconds into the AIM mission. We have confirmation that AIM is communicating through the tracking and data relay satellite. Our TDRS data shows that TDRS was actually locked on to the Pegasus rocket at the time of separation, and AIM was programmed to begin transmitting data to TDRS at separation plus 60 seconds, and that is exactly what occurred. So right now, the spacecraft team is in the process of beginning to determine the state of health of the spacecraft. Some of that will be coming through TDRS. Some of that will be coming through the Svalbard tracking station in Norway and through the Fairbanks, Alaska tracking station. All of this is going on during the first orbit, and we should have some kind of a state of health between 85 and 95 minutes after launch. So right now we're waiting for our launch director to come over and talk to us about the countdown.
3.708.
Yeah, I copy 2036.
And we'll also have some launch replays very shortly.
Copy, thank you. And in case you didn't
at
hear,
18 minutes 8 seconds into the
also here at
mission of AIM, this is Pegasus Launch Control.
Everything's looking good.
This is Pegasus Launch Control, now 19 minutes 10 seconds into the AIM mission. We're going to be looking now at some replays of the AIM launch.
Professor Stephen Hawking, who's 65 years old and has been almost totally paralyzed by motor neurone disease for the last 40 years, is in Florida to travel on a specially modified aeroplane. As it dives to zero gravity over the Atlantic Ocean, he'll be able to float inside, free of his wheelchair.
A stellar mind, a disease-ravaged body. Today, though, Stephen Hawking will move beyond his disability and float in zero gravity.
I am looking forward to experiencing weightlessness. It has been many decades since I have been out of my wheelchair.
The preparations here have been exhaustive. A double of the same height and weight as Professor Hawking has been used in test flights. The two doctors who will fly at his side have given the all clear. He is good to go. Each cycle begins with the aircraft diving at an angle of about 45 degrees, and that's to build up maximum speed. When it gets to about 680 miles an hour, the pilot pulls the nose up, almost stalling the aircraft, which then dives again. And it's at this point that the people on board start to float around in the cabin. They're experiencing zero gravity. Now that dive then goes on for some 25 or 30 seconds, but at the bottom of it, the plane has to, of course, to pull out. And at that point, things on board start getting pretty uncomfortable. Everyone feeling twice the normal level of gravity, everyone feeling twice as heavy as they would if they were still on the ground. It's physically demanding, especially for someone with such profound disabilities. But Professor Hawking hopes that this is a step towards his dream of one day going into space. Jeremy Cook, BBC News, Cape Canaveral.
If NATO countries won't respect conventional arms controls, well, neither will we. That was the message from Vladimir Putin in what he insisted was his last State of the Nation address as Russian president. Speaking to Parliament in Moscow, Mr. Putin announced that Russia was suspending its compliance with a Soviet-era treaty limiting conventional forces in Europe. And he linked this directly to Washington's plans to install a missile defense system in Poland and the Czech Republic.
They are planning to station elements of anti-missile defense systems in the Czech Republic and Poland, and new members, such as Slovakia and the Baltic states, despite preliminary agreements with the alliance, have not joined the conventional forces in Europe. In this connection, I consider it expedient to declare a moratorium on Russia's implementation of this treaty.
President Putin there. I asked our Moscow correspondent how serious a threat this really is.
Russians are deeply upset and annoyed and worried about the American plans to put interceptor missiles, this anti-ballistic missile system, into Poland and the Czech Republic. And the words being used by the Russian government are steadily getting stronger and stronger. And this is, I would say, that the strongest indication yet that the Russians will hit back, that if the Americans do go ahead and place these interceptor missiles, say in Poland with the radar in Czech Republic, then the Russians will retaliate by withdrawing from this important arms treaty.
And yet the US position is that we're only doing it on a very small scale. Condoleezza Rice said only today that President Putin's position was ludicrous. Why is the gap so great between the two sides?
Well, the gap is enormous, but from the Russian perspective, it doesn't really matter how many missiles the Americans are talking about right now. They're saying only 10. The issue is that the missiles are right on the border, very, very close to the Russian border, and the Russians fear that more missiles or other weapon systems could be placed in that region, which would be a direct threat to Russian security. And it was interesting, we had Robert Gates, the US Defense Secretary, here just a few days ago, and he was given very short shrift also by the Russians. They just don't buy the argument that this is not a threat to Russian security.
Richard Galpin there in Moscow.
On this, Matthew?
Colleen, thanks very much. Well, that's right. This latest dispute, this latest threat by Vladimir Putin threatens to escalate the diplomatic standoff between Russia and NATO over the US plan to deploy missile defences in Eastern Europe to the west of Russia's borders. The Kremlin has said that it's very concerned about that. They could be destabilising for security in the region. But Washington says these anti-missile defences are aimed not at Russia's vast nuclear deterrent, but on the possibility of rogue missiles being fired in the future from countries like Iran or perhaps even from North Korea. Nevertheless, this is something that is really straining relations between the two countries. Vladimir Putin threatening to look at the possibility of freezing implementation of an important security treaty in Europe that limits the amounts of armed forces to be deployed on both sides of what was NATO and the Warsaw Pact countries. Russia saying that if an agreement is not done with NATO officials in the US, and they're talking about it today in Norway, then they will look at freezing their commitments underneath that crucial treaty, Colleen.
It was interesting.
He's wanted to be a soldier his entire life. Prince Harry expected to deploy to Iraq within weeks. He's trained hard and made it clear he wants to serve on the front lines.
If they said, no, you can't go front line, then I wouldn't drag my sorry ass through Sandhurst, and I wouldn't be where I am now, because the last thing I want to do is have my soldiers sent away to Iraq or wherever like that, and for me to be held back home twiddling my thumbs thinking, well, what about David, what about Derek?
But today, British newspaper and television news thrust the war in Iraq back to the front pages, because the prince may not be going after all. It is widely reported a last-minute review is now underway by Army chiefs about sending Harry. The big question, does the high-profile soldier prince attract more danger to himself and those he serves with? The media in Britain has widely reported fears that Harry could be tracked and targeted by insurgents in Iraq. It's this pomp and ceremony that the prince wants to leave behind, instead leading his men onto the battlefield of Iraq as an ordinary soldier. But all that could be put on hold if certain army chiefs have their way. And if that happens, reports say Harry could quit the army altogether. The timing is without surprise. Just last week, 2 British soldiers were killed in the same type combat vehicle that Harry is slated to serve in. The debate over the merit of the war in Iraq is largely over in Britain. Front pages react to news of Harry, not events. Often apathy and Iraq fatigue keep the daily papers and television news from vigorously covering what many here seem to feel is an ill-conceived conflict. Today, one newspaper, The Independent, even highlighted that by characterizing one soldier's death as, quote, largely unnoticed.
Grenade.
But the story of Harry potentially being held from combat duty has not been lost on the British public, with many throwing their support behind the soldier prince.
Yes, because he's trained for it, and, you know, if it's not good enough for one young soldier, why is it good enough for all our other soldiers?
Whether or not he goes to war is down to him.
Not everyone agrees. Former UK Defence Secretary Michael Portillo says Harry's duty lies elsewhere.
I'm sure he's as brave as any fellow officer, any of the soldiers that he leads. He wants to do his duty. But my argument would be that in this case, because he's third in line to the throne, he has a higher duty than leading men in battle, and his duty is to stay alive.
As 3 more bodies of British soldiers arrive in the UK Thursday from Iraq, the concern among some is that holding the prince back from combat service would be a PR victory for insurgents. But perhaps far less of one than if anything should happen to the man third in line to the British throne. Cal Perry, CNN, London.
Spent his whole life doing groundbreaking work on black holes and the origins of the universe. He's written some fantastic books. Well, he may be bound to a wheelchair because of a debilitating disease, but today he is going to float free in a zero-gravity flight. Space correspondent Miles O'Brien joins us to explain a little bit more. You know, Stephen Hawking, amazing guy.
He is. It's such an amazing mind. Cosmologist, astrophysicist, one of the greatest minds on this planet, best-selling author to boot, but of course imprisoned by ALS, Lou Gehrig's disease, for all these years, and he is about to realize a dream he's had for quite some time, and will experience gravity, something he has thought an awful lot about, in an entirely different way, flying on a civilian airplane, the zero-G aircraft, where civilians can purchase a ticket to experience what astronauts have experienced in training all these years, here off the Kennedy Space Center. That flight will be taking off very shortly. And assuming all goes well, the doctors give it the go-ahead, and Professor Hawking feels good about it, we'll experience several 25-second bursts of weightlessness, 0G as they call it. Now, they did a trial run yesterday. An 8th grader who happens to be a big fan of Stephen Hawking, a science standout, who also happens to have about the same stature and weight as Professor Hawking, got up there and they tested out their theory of using spotters to make sure that Professor Hawking lands safely on the padded floor of that aircraft. This morning, Professor Hawking was all smiles and kept pressing everybody in the Zero G Corporation to make sure they do as many of these roller coaster rides as possible. We talked to Professor Hawking last night about how excited he is about the flight.
I am very excited. I have been wheelchair-bound for almost 4 decades, and the chance to float free in Zero-G will be wonderful.
Now, I had an opportunity to fly on this Zero-G aircraft a couple of years ago, Jim, and I should tell you the big concern, because people with ALS who are, in his case, almost completely paralyzed, respiratory concerns are a big issue, and particularly when you're experiencing more than the gravity we're feeling right now, which is what happens when you start climbing up, when you sort of get to the valley of that roller coaster ride. So what they're going to do, first of all, they've got him rigged up with all kinds of medical sensors to test the oxygen in his blood pressure, as well as an EKG, and they will flatten out the bottom part so it's not quite as severe when they hit the mat there, so to speak. There'll be 2 doctors, 2 nurses on board, and then spotters all around him to make sure that he is comfortable and has a good flight. And there is a serious side of this, Jim. He says one of the reasons he's doing this is he fears for the future of our planet, and he believes human beings have got to think about space for the survival of the human species in the long run, and he wants to bring this all to our attention. Jim?
Miles O'Brien, fascinating story. It will be interesting to hear what Stephen Hawking has to say when he gets back down.
Yes, will.
All right, Miles O'Brien there. Thank you so much.
That was great.
It really was.
Love it.
Eine Bein war er schon im Irakkrieg, doch nun scheint der Einsatz von Prinz Harry mehr als fraglich. Denn das britische Verteidigungsministerium prüft nun offenbar erneut, ob eine Stationierung des Prinzen seine Kameraden im Irak zu sehr gefährden könnte. Was die Briten über den möglichen royalen Rückzug denken, dazu Ulrich Klose aus London.
Nach monatelangen Vorbereitungen erwartete Harry seinen Marschbefehl täglich. Eigentlich sollte er ab Mai eine gepanzerte Aufklärertruppe im Irak kommandieren. Aber jetzt macht das Militär offenbar eine Kehrtwende. Ein royaler Fronteinsatz scheint zu gefährlich. Die Bedrohung ist für die britischen Truppen in den vergangenen Wochen viel größer geworden. Das ist klar, nachdem Anschläge auf britische Fahrzeuge untersucht wurden. Die Queen soll von vornherein gegen das Kriegsabenteuer ihres Enkels gewesen sein. Aber Harry, der als Kind gerne im Panzer spielte, stellte schon bei der Offiziersausbildung in Sandhurst klar, kein Schönwettersoldat sein zu wollen. Hätten sie mir gesagt, du darfst nie an die Front, dann hätte ich meinen Hintern nie nach Sandhurst bewegt. Mit etlichen Drohungen unterstrichen die Extremisten, dass sie Harry ins Visier nehmen wollen. Außerdem erlebt der Irak derzeit einen der blutigsten Kriegsmonate. Und nicht nur die Briten wollen bald den Rückzug einleiten, geht es nach dem Repräsentantenhaus, sollen auch erste US-Truppen im Oktober heimkehren. Trotzdem befürworten längst nicht alle Briten, dass Harry zu Hause bleiben soll. Sie sollten ihn hinschicken. Warum soll er nach dieser Ausbildung nicht auch das tun, was all seine Kameraden machen?
Ich denke, er sollte hier bleiben. Harry wäre doch nur eine zusätzliche Gefahr für andere Soldaten.
Harry soll gedroht haben, die Armee zu verlassen, wenn er nicht in den Irak darf. Aber dort würde er derzeit selber mehr zum Problem, als dass er zur Lösung des Konflikts beitragen könnte.
Gegen Malaria. So schwungvoll sieht man den US-Präsidenten nicht jeden Tag. George W. Bush hat im Park des Weißen Hauses eine flotte Sohle aufs Parkett gelegt, gemeinsam mit Ehefrau Laura und Tänzern aus Afrika. Er versuchte sich auch an deren Trommel und ahmte die Bewegungen seiner Mittänzer nach. Die Darbietung hatte einen ernsten Hintergrund. Bush will Afrika im Kampf gegen Malaria unterstützen und hatte deshalb zu dem Treffen zum Afrika-Malaria-Tag eingeladen.
Missile test site, protecting only the empty water of the Pacific Ocean. It would be moved roughly over the next 5 years near to Prague in the Czech Republic, with 10 accompanying missiles deployed in Poland. Now, the math of that is important. That would be 10 non-nuclear missiles compared to hundreds of Russian missiles carrying thousands of nuclear warheads. It's a mismatch, not a real defense, and U.S. officials say everyone knows it.
Let's be real about this and realistic about this. The idea that somehow 10 interceptors and a few radars in Eastern Europe are going to threaten the Soviet strategic deterrent is purely ludicrous, and everybody knows it. The Russians have thousands of warheads. The idea that you can somehow stop the Russian strategic nuclear deterrent with a few interceptors just doesn't make sense.
The Czech and Polish governments are proceeding with the plan, but they face real opposition from their own people. A poll this month showed 68% of people in the Czech Republic opposed hosting the radar base, and a similar poll in Poland showed 57% were opposed to having the missiles. Despite that opposition, despite protests, both governments say they are going ahead with the plan. Back to you.
All right. It is a tense time in U.S.-Russian relations, with Washington telling Moscow to abandon Cold War thinking and dismissing its concerns about U.S. plans to put a missile defense system in Europe. But the argument certainly is not one-sided. And earlier today, Russian President Vladimir Putin made his point and made it quite strongly. Matthew Chance has the story.
Russia's strategic missile forces, a powerful nuclear deterrent the Kremlin says is under threat. Moscow's already voiced its opposition to U.S. plans to deploy a missile shield in Eastern Europe. Now the Russian president says he'll freeze a key European defense pact if the plan goes ahead.
I propose we declare a moratorium on fulfillment by Russia of the Conventional Forces in Europe treaty.
The Cold War era treaty is meant to limit armed forces in Europe. Suspending it could have dangerous consequences for the continent. These are the US interceptors causing such Kremlin concern. Washington says they're designed to take out missiles that could in future be fired from countries like Iran and North Korea, and dismisses the idea Russia's vast nuclear arsenal would be affected.
The idea that somehow 10 interceptors and a few radars in Eastern Europe are going to threaten the Soviet strategic deterrent is purely ludicrous, and everybody knows it.
But the Kremlin isn't backing down, and this dispute over missile defense could well escalate.
Vladimir Putin has delivered a hawkish national address, threatening not just to freeze this treaty with NATO, but also criticizing what he said was foreign money coming in an attempt to meddle in Russia's internal affairs. He didn't name any names, but in the past, Russian officials have accused Western countries of supporting opposition figures trying to destabilize the country.
But these are the words of a Russian president apparently on his way out. Amid speculation, Putin might amend the Russian constitution to allow his third presidential term. He gave the clearest statement yet. That would not happen.
In 2008, my term in office will expire, and the next State of the Nation address will be given by another head of state.
Still, with a year of his presidency to run, it's not too late for Vladimir Putin to change his mind. Matthew Chance, CNN Moscow.
Well, a short time ago, NATO expressed grave concern over the Russian president's announcement about freezing its commitments under a European arms control pact. President Putin has certainly been angry about the U.S. missile defense plans for a long time, as you heard Matthew say there. The U.S. Defense Secretary was in Moscow just this week trying to address the Kremlin's opposition and asking the Kremlin to abandon it. But with or without Mr. Putin's approval, the plan does seem to be moving ahead. Jonathan Mann has some insight.
It was controversial right from the start, and Russia never liked it. Back when Ronald Reagan championed the idea of a big missile defense system, it was quickly dubbed Star Wars. That was 2 decades ago. The Russians don't like it any better today. Call it Star Wars, call it a new Cold War. Moscow is mad, and the U.S. is trying to calm the Kremlin down.
The days of the Cold War are over, and no one should seek a return to them.
Right now, the system headed for Europe, which some people are calling son of Star Wars, is in the Marshall Islands at the aptly named Reagan Missile Test Site, protecting only the empty water of the Pacific Ocean. It would be moved roughly over the next 5 years near to Prague in the Czech Republic, with 10 accompanying missiles deployed in Poland. Now, the math of that is important. That would be 10 non-nuclear missiles compared to hundreds of Russian missiles carrying thousands of nuclear warheads.
The system is strictly defensive. The discussion is about 10 interceptors in Poland, which will really not upset the strategic balance in Europe or more worldwide.
The Czech and Polish governments are proceeding with the plan, but they face real opposition from their own people. A poll this month showed 68% of people in the Czech Republic opposed hosting the radar base, and a similar poll in Poland showed 57% were opposed to having the missiles. Despite that opposition, despite protests, both governments say they are going ahead with the plan. Back to you.
All right, John, thanks very much. Well, is he or isn't he? New controversy over Prince Harry's possible deployment to Iraq. We'll tell you what the British Defense Ministry is saying. It's denying media reports that it's banning Prince Harry from serving in Iraq. Still, it says Prince Harry's deployment is under review. The 22-year-old is third in line to the British throne, and he is due to head to Iraq with his regiment in the coming weeks. World-renowned astrophysicist Stephen Hawking is escaping his paralysis, if only briefly, by free-floating in zero gravity. The celebrated scientist and author is on a space tourism flight that creates the experience of microgravity through 25-second plunges over the Atlantic Ocean. Hawking suffers from a debilitating disease, and he spent a lifetime doing groundbreaking work on things like black holes and the origins of the universe. He spoke to reporters before taking off.
As you can imagine, I am very excited. I have been wheelchair-bound for almost 4 decades, and the chance to float free in zero-G will be wonderful. See you in zero-G.
All right, there it is. Well, the flight's expected to return to its landing pad in Florida about a half hour from now. All right, astrophysicist Stephen Hawking escaped his paralysis, if only briefly, by free-floating in zero gravity. The scientist and author went on a space tourism flight. This one creates the experience of microgravity through 25-second plunges over the Atlantic Ocean. His flight is expected to return to the landing pad in Florida any minute now, apparently. Hawking suffers from a debilitating disease. He spoke to reporters before taking off.
As you can imagine, I am very excited. I have been wheelchair-bound for almost 4 decades, and the chance to float free in zero-G will be wonderful. See you in zero-G.
Hawking has spent a lifetime doing groundbreaking work on black holes and the origins of the universe. He says the long-term survival of humans requires venturing out into space. Well,
Stephen Hawking escaped his paralysis, if only briefly, by free-floating in zero gravity. The scientist and author went on a space tourism flight that created the experience of microgravity through 25-second-long plunges over the Atlantic Ocean. Hawking, who suffers from a debilitating disease, spoke to reporters just before takeoff.
As you can imagine, I am very excited. I have been wheelchair-bound for almost 4 decades, and the chance to float free in zero-G will be wonderful. See you in zero-G.
Now, Hawking has spent a lifetime doing groundbreaking work on black holes and the origins of the universe. He says the long-term survival of humans may require venturing out into space. World Sport is straight ahead. I'll be back in a moment. We'll have the headlines.
Welcome back. He's known for his contributions to theoretical physics, but at last Stephen Hawking knows firsthand what zero gravity really feels like. The world-famous physicist broke free of his wheelchair on Thursday to enjoy a little weightlessness. Miles O'Brien has a look.
Stephen Hawking was waiting for this not-so-weighty moment for years. The brilliant astrophysicist and best-selling popularizer of science slipping the bonds of gravity after nearly 4 decades in a wheelchair.
It was amazing.
Hawking suffers from amyotrophic lateral sclerosis, or Lou Gehrig's disease. He is almost totally paralyzed, unable to speak without computerized assistance. but there was no mistaking his enthusiasm as he floated free.
Professor Hawking reached for the sky and he touched the heavens today. And the best thing is, if someone like he can go, all of you can go as well.
He got a free ride on a specially rigged 727 flown by a company called Zero G, which offers astronaut-style thrills to anyone willing and able to pay $3,500. The plane flies a wild roller coaster pattern, giving passengers 30-second spurts of weightlessness, which I got a chance to experience a few years ago. Hawking and his doctors were most worried about the steep climb after the free fall, where passengers suddenly get pressed to the padded floor at gravity ×2. But he flew and floated without a worry.
The zero G part was wonderful, and the high G part was no problem. I could have gone on and on. Space, here I come.
He enjoyed 8 spurts of weightlessness, about 4 minutes in all. A brief moment in time to savor for a man who gave the world new insights into gravity and now has defied it. Miles O'Brien, CNN, at the Kennedy Space Center, Florida.
It wasn't just for fun. Hawking says his real motive is to increase public interest in space because he believes that human survival depends on going into space. Do you agree? Do you think that human survival will depend on leaving the planet? Let's take a look at a few of your thoughts. Lovely from Manila says, the survival of the human race, I believe, has nothing to do with going into space. Our survival depends on how well we can adapt to our environment. And Aldous from Latvia writes, when faced with necessity, human ingenuity is boundless. Life on this planet is finite, and that gives us a chance to prevail in unimaginable locations. Some smart folks out there. If you'd like to join them and send us your thoughts, email us at yourviews@cnn.com.
Der gelähmte britische Astrophysiker Stephen Hawking hat sich einen Traum erfüllt. Bei sogenannten Parabelflügen in einer Boeing 727 erlebte er 8-mal das Gefühl der Schwerelosigkeit. Ohne Rollstuhl schwebte der 65-Jährige durch die Kabine des Flugzeugs. Hawking war begeistert. Über seinen Sprachcomputer ließ das Physikgenie später mitteilen, ich hätte immer weitermachen können.
Schwerelos schwebt Stephen Hawking in der Flugzeugkabine. Für den schwerkranken Astrophysiker geht damit ein Traum in Erfüllung. 25 Sekunden ohne Rollstuhl, 25 Sekunden, in denen er nicht spürt, wie sehr er in seinem Körper gefangen ist. Kurz vor Beginn des Manövers hatten Helfer den 65-Jährigen aus dem Rollstuhl gehoben und auf Schaumstoff gebettet. Noch lange nach dem Flug wirkt Hawking völlig gelöst und glücklich. Die Schwerelosigkeit war wunderbar. Ich hätte immer so weiterfliegen können. Dabei ging es Hawking nicht nur um das eigene kurzzeitige Vergnügen. Der Physiker knüpft natürlich auch eine wissenschaftliche Botschaft an sein Abenteuer. Das Leben auf der Erde läuft Gefahr, von einer Katastrophe wie der globalen Erwärmung, einem Nuklearkrieg oder anderen Gefahren ausgelöscht zu werden. Die Menschheit hat keine Zukunft, wenn sie nicht den Weltraum für sich erobert. Stephen Hawking leidet an einer unheilbaren Muskelschwäche, ist seit Jahrzehnten an den Rollstuhl gefesselt. Der 65-Jährige kann nur noch über einen Sprachcomputer mit der Außenwelt kommunizieren, den er per Augenbewegung und Gesichtsmimik steuert. Hawking startete vom Kennedy-Raumfahrtzentrum in Florida zu dem einstündigen Abenteuer über dem Atlantik. Zu dem Parabelflug stieg die Boeing 727 in eine Höhe von 10.000 Metern auf, um dann im Sturzflug auf fast 2.500 Meter abzusinken. Für die Passagiere der Moment der Schwerelosigkeit. Hawking konnte diesen Augenblick gleich 8-mal erleben, ein wahrlich erhebendes Gefühl für den schwerkranken Mann.
After 4 decades, paralyzed, wheelchair-bound, freedom. Professor Stephen Hawking, weightless, in zero gravity. For a few precious seconds, the world's leading cosmologist doing space gymnastics. Even he cannot have calculated the sheer joy of this moment before it actually arrived.
It was amazing. I could have gone on and on. Space, here I come.
Each 30 seconds of zero gravity means the aircraft must go through a roller coaster cycle of climb and dive. physically demanding for anyone on board. Organisers say they hope Professor Hawking would manage 1 or 2 cycles. He astonished them.
We did a total of 8 0G parabolas, which is about 4 minutes of weightlessness, which is more than he will get when he eventually goes on a suborbital flight into space. Professor Hawking reached for the sky and he touched the heavens today.
And so for Professor Stephen Hawking, it has been a hugely successful day, and one which brings him one step closer to the big dream of one day going into space. Jeremy Cook, BBC News, Cape Canaveral.
More about that and all the other news in this programme at the website bbcnews.com. And also for more flying antics, you can watch a report about a hairdresser who put her skills into work at 14,000 feet, cutting a woman's hair whilst they were skydiving together off Israel's coast in a bid to get into the record books. Rather her than me, I think. On the website, you'll also find audio and visual reports from BBC's correspondents from around the world, and you can share your views at the Have Your Say link. bbcnews.com. Do have a look at the website.
Zwischen dem Westen und Russland wie seit dem Kalten Krieg nicht mehr. Die NATO ist über den von Präsident Putin angedrohten Abrüstungsstopp tief besorgt. Außenminister Steinmeier warnte beim Außenministertreffen in Oslo vor einer Spirale des Misstrauens. Dazu Andrea Dette.
Die Polizei in Oslo greift hart durch. 800 Demonstranten protestieren gegen die NATO. Genau vor dem Tagungsort, an dem die Bündnismitglieder Putins Paukenschlag verdauen müssen. Der sogenannte KSE-Vertrag steht auf dem Spiel. Er regelt die Abrüstung der konventionellen Streitkräfte in Europa. Wenn Gespräche nicht zu einer radikalen Veränderung führen, die unsere Partner auch umsetzen, werden wir den Vertrag annullieren. Drohungen, die an die Zeit des Kalten Krieges erinnern. Auslöser ist ein Abwehrsystem für Raketen, stationiert in Polen und Tschechien, nahe der russischen Grenze, geplant von den Amerikanern. Putin vergleicht dieses Projekt mit der Stationierung von Pershing-Atomraketen in den 80ern in Deutschland.
Es ist unsere Aufgabe zu vermeiden, dass eine Spirale wachsenden Misstrauens zwischen Amerika und Russland neu entsteht.
Die explosive Stimmung auf der Straße bekam die Polizei in Oslo schnell in den Griff. Die Eiszeit zwischen Russland und der NATO braucht jetzt diplomatisches Fingerspitzengefühl.
Einmal Weltall-Feeling am eigenen Leib erfahren. Der gelähmte Physiker Stephen Hawking hat sich den Traum von der Leichtigkeit des Seins erfüllt. Der 65-Jährige, der als einer der klügsten Wissenschaftler unserer Zeit gilt, wurde mit Berechnungen über sogenannte schwarze Löcher im Universum weltberühmt. Nun erlebte er das Phänomen Null-Schwerkraft bei einem sogenannten Parabelflug. Mehr von unserem Raumfahrtredakteur Mick Locher, der selber bereits solche Schwerelosigkeitsflüge erlebt hat.
Weltraumphysik im Selbstversuch, für das gelähmte Genie Stephen Hawking ein unvergessliches Erlebnis. Schon immer hatte sich der berühmteste Wissenschaftler der Welt das gewünscht, unendlich leicht zu sein. Der Schwerelosigkeitsflug war wunderbar, ich hätte immer weitermachen können. Was 3.000 € kostet und absolute Fitness erfordert, bekam der britische schwerkranke Astrophysiker geschenkt. Vom Weltraumbahnhof in Florida, wo sonst Space Shuttles landen, ging es 10 Kilometer über den Atlantik zum Parabelflug mit extremen Kurven. Jede hebelt 25 Sekunden die Schwerkraft aus. Helfer passten auf, dass der 65-jährige Experte für kosmische schwarze Löcher nicht wegschwebte. Seine Körperfunktionen überwachte ein Pfleger. Denn der Flug ist anstrengend, weil man vor der Schwerelosigkeit doppelt so viel wiegt. Schweben ohne Erdenschwere haben bisher höchstens 5.000 Menschen erlebt. Als Astronauten, Forscher, Chartergäste oder Journalisten.
Schwerelosigkeit bleibt ein außerirdisches Feeling und wahrscheinlich noch für etliche Jahre nur wenigen vorbehalten, die sich diesen Spaß hier leisten können, entweder als Wissenschaftler oder eben als Reporter.
In 3 Jahren könnte Hawking echte Schwerelosigkeit erleben. Dann gibt es private Raketenflüge ins All.
Ging es im Bundestag heute um ein wirklich wichtiges Thema, nämlich um die bessere Betreuung von Kleinkindern mit mehr Krippenplätzen. Doch erst stellte sich heraus, dass der Bundestag nicht beschlussfähig war. Im Parlament brach dann auch noch das Chaos aus. Demonstranten sprangen von der Tribüne, besetzten das Dach und auch die Politiker wirkten ziemlich konfus. Lothar Keller über einen turbulenten Freitag.
Selten hat der Bundestag beim Volk für solches Aufsehen gesorgt. Eine waghalsige Demonstration am Drahtseil, etwas hilflose Helfer und ein Publikum, das den Protest auf dem Hohen Haus gespannt verfolgt.
Finde ich eigentlich mutig.
Man muss schon
auch in der Politik mal was Aktives zu machen. Nur sinnlose Beschäftigung der Einsatzkräfte, die könnten andere Einsätze abwickeln, wie jetzt hier so Mist.
Diese Einsatzkräfte müssen unten zuschauen, wie die Reichstagskletterer oben ein Transparent ausrollen, als Protest gegen den angeblich zu großen Einfluss der Wirtschaft auf die Politik. Es war schon die zweite Sicherheitspanne, denn im Reichstag hatten zuvor andere Mitglieder der Gruppe erst Flugblätter geworfen und waren dann in die Reihen der Abgeordneten gesprungen.
Ich fordere Sie auf, solche Aktivitäten zu verlassen und sofort die Zuschauertribüne zu verlassen.
Verwirrung überall, beim Kameramann und beim Bundestagspräsidium. Es ist der Höhepunkt eines Chaostags im Parlament. Eigentlich war Kinderbetreuung das Thema, doch es entwickelt sich eine erregte Debatte darüber, ob die abwesende Ministerin von der Leyen dazu in den Bundestag zitiert werden soll.
Die Ministerin ist aufgrund anderweitiger Termine verhindert.
Wir haben heute einen Sitzungstag und da kann die Ministerin nicht entschuldigt sein.
Also wird abgestimmt und das Ergebnis ist die nächste Überraschung. Es ist halt Freitagnachmittag und es sind nicht mehr genug Abgeordnete da für ein gültiges Ergebnis.
Ich unterbreche die Sitzung für heute endgültig. Ich wünsche Ihnen ein angenehmes Wochenende.
Und so legen die gewählten Politiker ihr Parlament ganz alleine lahm, ohne Demonstranten. Die bringen derweil draußen ihre Aktion zu Ende. Illegal zwar, aber gelungen.
Im Streit um das US-Raketenabwehrsystem für Osteuropa hat der russische Präsident Putin heute kräftig nachgelegt. Putin bezeichnete das System als eine Bedrohung für Russland, die mit den Pershing-Atomraketen der 80er Jahre vergleichbar sei. Damals hatte die NATO Mittelstreckenraketen als Abschreckung gegen die Sowjetunion in Europa stationiert. Die NATO-Außenminister riefen Putin bei ihrem Treffen in Oslo heute zur Mäßigung auf. Putin hatte gestern bereits angekündigt, er überlege, geltende Abrüstungsverträge zu kündigen, weil die USA in Polen und Tschechien ein Abfangsystem für feindliche Raketen aufstellen wollen. Das Schaulaufen der Kandidaten für die Nachfolge von US-Präsident Bush hat begonnen. Die aussichtsreichsten Bewerber der Demokratischen Partei, also die Gegner von Bush, trafen jetzt erstmals im Fernsehen aufeinander. Unter ihnen auch Hillary Clinton und Barack Obama. Wer eine gute Figur machte und wer federn lassen musste, dazu mehr von Ulrich Oppold aus New York.
Die Favoriten wie Barack Obama hatten ihre Fans mobilisiert an der Universität von Orangeburg in South Carolina. Gleich zu Beginn des TV-Duells ging es dann um den Amoklauf in Virginia. Wie viele von Ihnen hatten jemals in ihrem Leben eine Schusswaffe zu Hause, fragt der Moderator. 5 der 8 demokratischen Präsidentschaftskandidaten geben per Handzeichen den Waffenbesitz zu. Dann zielen sie aber mit Argumenten gemeinsam auf Präsident Bush. Wenn dieser Präsident uns nicht aus dem Irak herausholt, werde ich es als Präsidentin tun. Ich bin stolz darauf, dass ich von Anfang an gegen diesen Krieg war, weil ich glaubte, dass er uns ins Chaos führt, wie wir jetzt sehen. Hillary Clinton hat für den Irakkrieg gestimmt, das könnten ihr einige Wähler übel nehmen. Senator Clinton und jeder andere, der diesen Krieg befürwortet, muss sich jetzt entscheiden, ob er das Richtige getan hat. Ich habe meinen Job zu dieser Zeit so gut ich konnte gemacht. Es war eine ernsthafte Entscheidung, begründet durch die Informationen, die mir damals vorlagen. Viele Amerikaner verfolgten die Debatte wie hier in New York, haben sich aber längst noch nicht entschieden. Hillary hat die besten Voraussetzungen, die nächste Präsidentin zu werden, aber Obama den nötigen Schwung. Auch wenn er an diesem Abend nicht immer überzeugte. Auf die Frage nach dem Iran wollte er, wie er sagte, sich alle Optionen offen lassen, auch die militärische. Wen willst du atomar angreifen, Barack? Im Moment will ich niemanden atomar angreifen, das verspreche ich. Gewonnen hat diese Fernsehdebatte nach Umfragen Hillary Clinton. Ein erster Schritt auf einem weiten Weg, bis in den USA wie in Deutschland vielleicht einmal eine Frau das Land regieren wird.
Wir erleben derzeit den mit Abstand wärmsten April seit Beginn der Wetteraufzeichnungen vor rund 100 Jahren. Es ist so trocken, dass einigen Bundesländern aus Angst vor Bränden bereits ganze Waldgebiete gesperrt haben. In Brandenburg musste die Feuerwehr bereits mehr als 50 Brände löschen. Kai Reuker über die Schattenseiten des Rekordwetters.
Es wird ernst für die fliegenden Brandmelder. Seit heute gehen die Feuerwehren überall in Deutschland in die Luft. So wie hier im westfälischen Borken fliegen sie die Wälder ab. Sie suchen mögliche Brandherde, koordinieren die Einsätze. Die Gefahr ist groß. In der Nähe von Kassel etwa gerieten in der Nacht 5 Hektar Wald in Brand. 100 Feuerwehrleute und Löschhubschrauber waren stundenlang im Einsatz, die Flammen unter Kontrolle zu bringen.
Wir haben ja nicht nur Trockenheit, wir haben auch Sonne und viel Wind gehabt. Und gerade das trocknet den Boden aus.
Fast überall in Deutschland gilt inzwischen die zweithöchste Waldbrandstufe, hier orange eingefärbt. In weiten Gebieten im Osten gilt sogar die höchste. Seit dem Orkantief Kyrill liegen in vielen Wäldern noch umgestürzte Bäume und abgebrochene Äste. Genügend Futter für das Feuer.
Das ist also alles knochentrocken. Überall Nadelstreu, die also im höchsten Maße brandgefährlich ist.
Rauchen und Grillen in Waldnähe sind deshalb fast überall verboten. Es drohen Bußgelder. Die Trockenheit setzt auch den Flüssen zu. Auf der Elbe ist der Pegel allein in der vergangenen Woche um einen halben Meter gesunken. Die Frachtschifffahrt musste eingestellt werden. Auch der Rhein zieht sich zurück. Immerhin, wie hier in Köln, gewinnen einige auch dem Klimawandel noch positive Seiten ab.
Die NATO zeigte sich heute durch den heftigen Streit mit Russland tief beunruhigt, aber um Entspannung bemüht. Die NATO misst dem KSE-Vertrag große Bedeutung zu und hat sich immer um dessen Einhaltung bemüht. Daher sind wir weiterhin sehr beunruhigt über Russlands Absicht, den Vertrag einzufrieren. Wir haben hier in Oslo allerdings gehört, dass Moskau den KSE-Vertrag vielleicht nicht sofort einfrieren will. Weitere Gespräche soll es bereits am 10. Mai in Brüssel geben. Wladimir Putin legte heute jedoch bei seinem Treffen mit dem tschechischen Präsidenten Václav Klaus nach. Er verglich die Raketenabwehrpläne der USA mit der Stationierung von Atomraketen des Typs Pershing in den 80er Jahren. Die Bedrohung sei die gleiche. Die Raketenabwehrpläne der USA verändern die Sicherheitslage in Europa grundlegend. Wir fallen deswegen nicht in Hysterie, aber wir werden darauf entsprechend mit Gegenmaßnahmen reagieren. Russland ist offenbar auch verärgert, weil es seinen Einflussbereich schwinden sieht. Es ist umlagert von ehemaligen Warschauer Paktstaaten, die nun in der NATO zu Hause sind. Hinzu kommen Kandidaten wie Ukraine, Georgien und Moldawien. Der Bundesaußenminister ermahnte alle Parteien, aufeinander zuzugehen, und von der NATO forderte er mehr Engagement.
Ich glaube, dass es auch der Glaubwürdigkeit der NATO in der Welt ganz gut täte, wenn wir uns nicht selbst beschränkten auf diese Debatten wie im Augenblick bei Missile Defense,
sondern, so Außenminister Steinmeier, die NATO auch mit Abrüstungsinitiativen voranginge. Mit dem Streit um die Raketenabwehrpläne der USA und die Unabhängigkeit des Kosovo hat sich allerlei Ärger zwischen Russland und den USA angestaut. Der Bundesaußenminister regte heute an, diese Probleme seien am besten zu lösen in regelmäßigen Treffen zwischen den Verteidigungs- und Außenministern beider Länder.
Selten aber waren die Proteste so spektakulär wie heute während der laufenden Debatte über die Kinderbetreuung.
Seltene Fotos konnten die Reichstagsbesucher am Mittag schießen. Waghalsige Protestaktion an der Parlamentsfassade. Mit einem Transparent verkündet diese bislang unbekannte Gruppe ihre Botschaft. Die Höhenretter von der Feuerwehr machen dem Spuk ein Ende. Antiterrorspezialisten waren diesmal nicht gefragt. Aber wie steht es um die Sicherheit im Bundestag?
Der Deutsche Bundestag ist kein Hochsicherheitstrakt, sondern eine Volksvertretung. Und es gibt das ganz selbstverständliche Interesse und auch die Erwartung der Öffentlichkeit, diese eigene Vertretung mit einem nicht unverhältnismäßigen Aufwand an Kontrollen und an Überprüfungen besuchen zu können.
Welche juristischen Konsequenzen auf die Demonstranten zukommen, ist noch offen. Einige von ihnen hatten zeitgleich mit der Aktion draußen den Politikbetrieb in dem Gebäude gestört, während einer Abstimmung zur Geschäftsordnung plötzlich Tumulte auf den Zuschauerrängen. Ein paar Jugendliche werfen etwas in den Plenarsaal und entrollen Plakate. Das Parlament wird zu einer Art Turnhalle. Dann aber ließen sich die Störer widerstandslos abführen.
Wie nie, der Kurs der europäischen Währung stieg am Nachmittag vorübergehend auf ein neues Allzeithoch von $1,3682. Grund: Konjunkturdaten aus den USA waren schlechter ausgefallen als erwartet. Die deutsche Wirtschaft reagierte gelassen. Für die Konjunktur bestehe keine Gefahr, auch wenn der starke Euro die Exporte verteure. Und jetzt
April seit über 100 Jahren, nämlich in Deutschland 4,4 Grad wärmer als in normalen Jahren. Und da war natürlich auch viel zu trocken. Durchschnittlich fielen etwa 4 Liter Regen auf den Quadratmeter. Normal sind aber bei uns 60 Liter im April. Naja, und er war der sonnigste Monat seit über 100 Jahren, der sonnigste April. Er brachte nämlich 283 Stunden, normal sind also nur 152. Und er heizt uns weiter ein in Mitteleuropa, von Frankreich bis nach Polen, 25 Grad. Drumherum ist es überall kühler. Selbst am Mittelmeer haben wir nur Temperaturen um 20 Grad und im Norden 5 bis 15. Ja, heute Nacht wird eine große Wärmeinsel über Mitteleuropa, am Mittelmeer eben kühler und in Skandinavien eben dann so richtig frisch mit 5 bis 15 Grad. Und diese kühle Luft, die kommt in den nächsten Tagen, streift den Osten und den Nordosten Deutschlands. Und dann kann es so am Mittwoch Höchsttemperaturen im Norden nur noch von 10 bis 15 Grad geben. Ja, schauen wir uns noch mal ein wunderbares Satellitenbild von Norddeutschland heute an. Sie erkennen hier die Küste Dänemark, die Ostsee, Insel Fehmarn oder auch Rügen. Und Sie sehen auch die Größe der Felder hier über Mecklenburg-Vorpommern und ein gelber Farbton, also Raps wird dort viel angebaut. In Süddeutschland ist das nicht so deutlich, die Felder sind kleiner und da fallen vor allen Dingen die bewölkten Alpen heute auf. Das wird auch in den nächsten Tagen so sein, nachmittags immer wieder Wolken, Quellwolken, da entstehen dann einzelne Regenschauer oder Gewitter. Heute war das ja auch in Oberstdorf der Fall. Das war's, ich wünsche Ihnen einen schönen Abend und macht's.
Heute Nacht, liebe Zuschauer, willkommen. Wir haben zwar Frühling, aber keine Frühlingsgefühle. Dafür ist einfach schon zu sehr Sommer. Dieser April wird, das ist den Wetterexperten jetzt schon sonnenklar, der wärmste und der regenärmste seit mehr als 100 Jahren. Und das hat Folgen, nicht nur für Wiesen und Wälder. Was schön ist an diesem Wetter und was gar nicht schön, Steffen Lobenstein fasst zusammen.
Es ist heiß, sommerlich heiß, so mancher suchte Abkühlung in diesen Tagen und die war auch nötig. Deutschland hat seinen bisher wärmsten April erlebt. Wissenschaftlich ist das bewiesen. So lag der Temperaturdurchschnittswert im April von 1961 bis 90 bei 7,3 Grad. Dieser April liegt derzeit bei 11,7 Grad. So viel Sonne trocknet die Böden aus, die Bauern klagen. Immer öfter müssen Feuerwehren ausrücken, Waldbrände halten sie in Atem. Auch am späten Nachmittag in Wünsdorf in Brandenburg kämpfen mehr als 50 Einsatzkräfte gegen ein neues Feuer.
So eine Situation, wie wir sie dieses Frühjahr haben, dass wir seit dem 1. April die Warnstufe 4 haben. Ich habe sie noch nicht kennengelernt. Das sind jetzt schon 26, 27 Tage. Die 4 ist es schon extreme Verhältnisse.
Der April brachte einen weiteren Rekord, nur 4 Liter Niederschlag im Bundesdurchschnitt. Zum Vergleich, der bisher regenärmste April im Jahr 74 brachte es auf immerhin noch 21,3 Liter. Und auch die Sonne machte Überstunden, meist zeigte sie sich doppelt so lang wie üblich.
Bis Dienstag keine Änderung, nur Sonne und für viele auch die Wärme.
Auch eine gute Seite hat das laue Wetter. Freibäder und Biergärten öffneten meist 14 Tage eher. Zu stark war der Drang der Kunden an die frische Luft, auch weil ein langes Wochenende vor der Tür steht.
Es hat ja schon recht gut angefangen und gestern war ich auch schon am Rhein, habe schon Sonnenbrand am Rücken.
Sport machen, ein bisschen hier am Strand liegen wahrscheinlich und das Wetter einfach genießen, solange es so schön ist.
Sommer im April, außergewöhnlich. Mal schauen, was der Mai mit sich bringt.
Passen Sie auf sich auf, auch wegen der hohen Ozonwerte. Tipps und Warnungen finden Sie bei uns im Internet unter heute.de.
Ja, jetzt bleiben wir am Himmel. Ein Haarschnitt zwischen Himmel und Erde, den hat sich ein Friseur aus Israel auf die Fahne geschrieben. Die Schere in der Hand, den Fallschirmsprunglehrer im Rücken, stürzte sich Ohr in Ohr, so heißt der Figaro, aus dem Flugzeug und versuchte einer jungen Dame ein paar Haare abzuschneiden, was sich aber als ziemlich schwierig herausstellte. Viel Haar hat der fliegende Friseur offensichtlich nicht abgeschnitten, dafür aber kamen alle unverletzt am Boden an. Ob der luftige Scherenschnitt fürs Guinness-Buch der Rekorde reicht, denn davon träumt Ohr in Ohr, steht noch nicht fest.
Series Star Trek are expected to gather in the American state of New Mexico later to watch the ashes of Scotty being sent into space. The actor James Doohan, who played the part of the gruff engineer on the USS Enterprise, died 2 years ago. But his family said he always wanted to make it to the final frontier. From New Mexico, David Willis reports.
He was the chief engineer of the USS Enterprise and its unsung hero.
Engine room. What do you hear? We'll need all the power you can muster, mister.
Don't you worry, Captain. We'll beat those Klingon devils, even if I have to get out and push.
Scotty's intergalactic ingenuity proved an inspiration to millions well before the space race got underway. Today, Scotty's dying wish will be honoured. His ashes, together with those of some 200 other space enthusiasts, will be blasted into orbit. At a memorial service here, his widow paid tribute.
He is not the only one who dreamt of traveling among the stars and looked to the heavens with a smile on his face. He is in good company on this flight.
The cremated remains of people from no fewer than 10 countries have been placed aboard this rocket, among them those of Kathy Allen's uncle Jim.
I guess it was a couple of days before he died. He actually looked at me and he just kind of leaned back and he had the biggest smile on his face and he goes, "I'm going to the moon." And he was so excited because he was actually going to get to go into space.
Well, there have been numerous delays, but the rocket is now ready. It's time to beam Scotty up for a posthumous rendezvous with the stars.
And we're going to terminal countdown at T-minus 10, 9, 8,
Scotty's widow
7,
will press the button which will launch him and his fans into space.
2, 1, fire.
A final journey to the final frontier, hopefully with no Klingons in sight. David Willis, BBC News, New Mexico.
Willkommen zu unserem Newsüberblick. In England hat um 9:20 Uhr die Erde gebebt. Im Südosten des Landes in der Grafschaft Kent wurden 5,5 auf der Richterskala gemessen. Ein recht hoher Wert für Europa. Andere Quellen berichten von Erdstößen der Stärke 4,7. Sky News meldet, dass eine Explosion in der Stadt Folkestone das Beben ausgelöst haben könnte. Es wurden bereits Häuser evakuiert. Ob es Verletzte gibt, ist noch nicht bekannt. Die Zugverbindungen durch den Eurotunnel der Unterführung unter dem Ärmelkanal sind nicht betroffen.
In der südostenglischen Grafschaft Kent hat es ein Erdbeben gegeben. Das berichtet der britische Sender BBC. Das Beben habe sich kurz nach 9 Uhr deutscher Zeit ereignet. Es habe die Stärke von 5,7 auf der Richterskala erreicht. Es seien einige Häuser leicht beschädigt worden. Meldungen über Opfer liegen bislang nicht vor.
Doch wie gesagt, als heute Morgen in der südenglischen Grafschaft die Erde bebte, merkte man, dass in tausenden Häusern Augenzeugen berichteten, dass die Teller und Tassen auf dem Frühstückstisch wackelten. Dutzende Schornsteine sind von den Dächern gefallen. Zum Glück ist nach bisherigen Angaben der Polizei dabei niemand ernsthaft verletzt worden. Doch die Menschen sind verängstigt und verunsichert und die Polizei erteilte den Anwohnern inzwischen den Rat, sie sollten lieber in ihren Häusern bleiben, es sei denn, die Wände zeigten Risse auf. Und noch immer ist die Elektrizitätsversorgung in weiten Teilen Kents ebenfalls unterbrochen und das Telefonnetz ist auch beschädigt. Also eine ziemlich ernste Situation.
Wir sehen übrigens gerade oder haben gerade gesehen die ersten Bilder. Heißt das, wenn die Leute immer noch nicht in ihre Häuser zurück dürfen, dass dort mit weiteren Beben gerechnet wird?
Das kann die Polizei und die Sicherheitsbehörden zum derzeitigen Zeitpunkt nicht ausschließen. Obwohl das Beben seit 2,5 Stunden her ist, kann es nach wie vor sein, dass die Erde wieder beben wird. Und genau deswegen auch der Rat an die Leute, wenn das Haus nicht beschädigt ist, lieber im Haus drin bleiben, das ist sicherer. Das gilt vor allen Dingen auch für Gegenden, in denen Gas gerochen wird. Die Polizei berichtete, als ich vorhin gerade mit der Polizei in Kent telefoniert habe, dass Hunderte von Leuten angerufen hätten und sie berichteten, dass man Gas riechen könnte. Das deutet darauf hin, dass Gasleitungen beschädigt sind und das birgt auch die Gefahr von Explosionen in sich.
Jetzt hatte Sky ja gemeldet, möglicherweise sei eine Explosion an dem Beben schuld. Was kann da dran sein?
Diese Meldungen berufen auf ursprünglichen Augenzeugenberichten aus Kent. Mehrere Augenzeugen hatten berichtet, als sie die Polizei anriefen, sie hätten eine Explosion gehört. Das kann von der Polizei bislang nicht bestätigt werden. Allerdings muss man sagen, dass jedes Mal, wenn in Kent von Explosionen die Rede ist, die Leute nervös werden, denn das Atomkraftwerk Dungeness ist nicht weit entfernt und da werden die Leute verständlicherweise nervös.
Vielen Dank, Arndt Strickler nach London.
In Afghanistan hat es erstmals einen ernsten Zwischenfall gegeben. Bei der Landung nach einem Einsatzflug ist von einer der beiden Maschinen das Bugfahrwerk abgerissen. Die Besatzung sei aber unverletzt geblieben, so ein Sprecher der Luftwaffe. Vor gut 3 Wochen waren die 6 Tornados der Bundeswehr in Mazar-i-Sharif angekommen. Seit 2 Wochen sind sie als Teil der internationalen Schutztruppe ISAF als Aufklärungsflieger im Kampf gegen die Taliban im Einsatz.
A tremor which lasted a few seconds. The US Geological Survey has said it measured 4.3 on the Richter scale. That's the largest quake to hit Britain since 2002. You can find out more about that, the earthquake in Kent in the southeast of England, and indeed the rest of the day's news on our website, bbcnews.com.
Erschütterungen der Stärke 4,7 waren am Morgen im Süden des Landes kurz zu spüren. In Teilen der Grafschaft Kent sind Strom- und Telefonverbindungen unterbrochen. Schornsteine stürzten ein, einige Häuser wurden leicht beschädigt. Menschen wurden offenbar nicht verletzt.
It's not exactly being beamed up into space, but if things go as planned, the remains of the Star Trek actor who played Scotty on the TV series will be headed for its final frontier. James Doohan died 2 years ago at age 85. The ashes of about 200 people are to head to space Saturday on board a private rocket launched from a commercial spaceport in New Mexico. Well, although the Star Trek TV series has been out of production for years now, that's not keeping fans from filming their own new adventures. Jim Bolton takes a look at the lengths that some fans will go to keep on trekking.
They're opening fire.
It's Star Trek, but not as we know it.
Stop, you idiot!
Star-crossed lovers of all things Star Trek are spending thousands of their own dollars to make new Star Trek episodes.
I think we went into it with a certain amount of naivety, as you tend to do. None of us had a background in filmmaking, anything like that, obviously.
Fans in the United States and Europe are saying if franchise owner Paramount doesn't make new episodes, then they will don Klingon outfits and Vulcan ears and make videos themselves.
Just at the end of that bit of path there.
This group in Dundee, Scotland, started the film Intrepid 4 years ago. They thought it would take only a year or two.
It was an awful lot more hard work than we really thought it would be, and there were an awful lot of challenges that came up, that really stuff we didn't foresee in the slightest.
Sure, it's amateur video and no one is paid for their work, but one website boasts 30 million downloads for its series, and the reviews are pretty good, especially for scripts that follow creator Gene Roddenberry's optimistic vision of the future.
The visuals can be a bit below standard, the sound can be a bit below standard, but the script cannot be below standard. And that's one of the things that we focused on to begin with.
These episodes are just one symbol of Star Trek's allure. A recent Christie's auction of Star Trek props brought in $7 million, more than double what had been expected. And fans are preparing to say goodbye to Scotty. The ashes of the late actor James Doohan will be beamed up by private rocket heading for the stars in late April.
I don't need any help.
That will be especially poignant for the proud Trekkies in Scotland, who spend so much time and money on their hobby.
It probably is mad, but we enjoy it. It's a group of friends all doing something that we enjoy together.
You might be asking, what does Paramount Television think of all this? It won't say, but it hasn't hassled the Scottish production.
For the time being, Paramount seem happy to keep quiet. When the day comes that they come knocking with a cease and desist letter, well, everybody will just have to say fair game and stop. But until that day, I think everybody's just going to enjoy the ride, really.
You've got 15 minutes. But many Trekkies say Paramount must be pleased its 40-year-old Star Trek franchise is going where none have gone before. Jim Bolton, CNN, London.
All right, now let's read some emails from our viewers. We were asking, how do you feel about families spending nearly $500 to place just a few grams of ashes of relatives on a rocket? This email's from Lovely in the Philippines. She says it's a ridiculous idea. It's a waste of money and something impractical as well. Why not give these ashes to some space museum? But John says, I think it's pretty appropriate. I got Jamie Doohan's autograph years ago. The big surprise to me is that it seems to be extremely affordable. Basically, I didn't know it was so cheap. So maybe more people doing it. Keep emailing us at yourviews@cnn.com and we'll read some of your emails out on air a little later. I'm Rosemary Church. The headlines are coming up next.
Television series Star Trek are gathering in the US state of New Mexico to watch the ashes of Scotty be sent into space. The actor James Doohan, who played the part of the gruff engineer on the USS Enterprise, died 2 years ago, but his family said he always wanted to make it to the final frontier. A private firm called Space Services Inc. has loaded Scotty's ashes aboard the rocket, along with those of former astronaut Gordon Cooper and some 200 others. Well, I'm joined now from New Mexico by our correspondent David Willis. And David, I suppose finally we can say Scotty gets to go into space for real.
Absolutely, Jonathan. Countdown is already underway here. About 10 minutes' time or so, Scotty is likely to be beamed up from here, about 2.5 miles behind us here. This is the closest we can get for safety reasons. But it's not just about Scotty or James Doohan, the actor who played that part in the Star Trek. It's also about 200 other people whose cremated remains are also going on that same rocket. And many of their relatives are here. And it's going to be a very emotional day for a lot of them because in many cases, the dying wish of these people had been to have their remains sent into space. Of course, a lot of them are huge Star Trek fans, or were huge Star Trek fans, and of course, particular fans of James Doohan in the role of Scotty.
So talk us through, David, exactly how this is going to work.
Jonathan, it's just a little bit difficult to hear you. I just wonder if you might...
Yes, absolutely, David. Just talk us through, David, exactly how this is going to work there. What's going to happen?
Right, well, what's going to happen is this. In about 10 minutes' time, there will be that blast-off from that side about 2.5 miles from us here. The rocket, which is about 20 feet long, fairly small rocket, not we're talking Cape Canaveral standards here, will blast off. It will travel about 70 miles into the air, which is the technical start of space. It will spend about 4 minutes up there before descending. It will break in two as it comes down. The nose cone, which is the bit which contains these cremated remains of the people who are going up there, will land about 33 miles from here at a NASA facility called White Sands, and it will then be recovered, and those remains in their little canisters will be handed back to the relatives who have converged here to see all this happen.
We'll be watching with interest, as I'm sure you will. Thank you very much indeed, David. The actor James Doohan, who played the gruff engineer on the USS Enterprise, died 2 years ago, but his family said he always wanted to make it to the final frontier. Fans gathered in the US state of New Mexico to watch a rocket carrying his ashes, along with those of some 200 other people, being blasted out to the atmosphere. Well, I'm joined now from New Mexico by our correspondent, David Willis. David.
Well, the rocket has been launched, the rocket has landed, it's all been successful, and many people here are very relieved, Jonathan. I'm joined now by two of the ladies who were very closely involved in this. They are Wendy Doohan, whose husband is Scotty, of course, and Susan Cooper, whose husband Gordon was on the Majestic space flight, if I'm not mistaken. Wendy Doohan, first of all, what did you think of it all? How emotional was it for you?
It was very emotional on several different levels. One, because Jimmy, aka Scotty, was finally able to achieve space. It was a successful launch. The people with Up Aerospace just performed their jobs flawlessly. And Susan and I got to throw the firing switch and actually send the rocket up. And the fact that it was a successful launch, all the participants with Space Services, they had a tremendous swelling of heart knowing that their loved ones were able to actually achieve space today.
Susan, an emotional day for you as well, obviously.
Yes, it was. It was totally different from any of the other launches I had experienced. And of course, not only my involvement, but this was fitting and in some ways final, and tough emotions on, good and bad.
What could this do for space tourism, Wendy? It's certainly, I suppose, going to focus attention back on it, isn't it?
I think it will, and that's something that Jimmy always tried to promote wherever he went, because he truly believed that we should be dancing among the stars, and with the space race in the private sector and healthy competition, I think we'll probably get there faster.
Very good. Wendy Doohan, Susan Cooper, thank you very much indeed for joining us here in the desert of New Mexico. And with that, it's back to you in the studio in London.
David, thank you very much indeed. Well,
Samstagabend, 6:45, hier sind die RTL-Nachrichten. Schock in England. Ein starkes Erdbeben erschüttert am Morgen die Südküste Großbritanniens und richtet schwere Schäden an. Tausende Haushalte sind ohne Strom. Am frühen Morgen hat ein für Großbritannien ungewöhnlich heftiges Erdbeben den Süden der Insel erschüttert. Die Erdstöße erreichten eine Stärke von 4,3. Bei den Rettungsdiensten gingen hunderte Notrufe ein. Am schwersten betroffen waren die Einwohner kleinerer Ortschaften am Ärmelkanal, wo tausende Haushalte stundenlang ohne Strom waren. Aus England berichten Anne Walkenbach und Ulrich Klose.
Breaking news this morning, an earthquake has hit in Kent.
Die Nachrichtensender unterbrachen ihr Programm, als das Erdbeben kurz nach 8 Uhr am Morgen Südengland erschütterte. Schornsteine stürzten ein, Risse in Häuserwänden, Dachziegel flogen auf die Straßen. Die etwa 15 Sekunden langen Erdstöße sorgten für Panik in der Bevölkerung.
Ich dachte, das ganze Haus stürzt ein. Alle Möbel wackelten und meine Tochter schrie wie am Spieß. Ein Albtraum. Mein Bett zitterte und die Bilder fielen von der Wand. Erst glaubte ich an eine Gasexplosion. Alle im Haus hatten eine wahnsinnige Angst.
Stundenlang waren hunderte Familien ohne Strom. Nachdem Anwohner von Gasgeruch berichteten, wird nun überprüft, ob durch die Erdstöße Leitungen beschädigt wurden. Das Epizentrum lag etwa 12 Kilometer südlich von Dover im Ärmelkanal. Dort befindet sich eine gigantische Erdfalte. Die Verschiebung der Erdplatten ist der Auslöser für schwere Erschütterungen. Möglich sind auch in Zukunft größere Beben bis zu Stärke 6. Zunächst gab es Befürchtungen, der 37 Kilometer lange Kanaltunnel könne von dem Beben betroffen sein. Aber schnell kam Entwarnung. Der Betrieb des Eurostar-Schnellzuges musste nicht unterbrochen werden. Großes Glück, dass die Erde so früh am Morgen und dazu am arbeitsfreien Wochenende bebte. Die Straßen waren fast menschenleer, nur ein Anwohner wurde leicht verletzt.
Im Krisengebiet. Beim Einsatz der deutschen Tornados in Afghanistan hat es einen ersten Zwischenfall gegeben. Bei der Landung in Masai Sharif knickte bei einer Maschine das Bugfahrwerk ab. Die Besatzung, die im Süden Taliban-Verstecke ausgespäht hatte, blieb unverletzt. Kurz vor Ablauf eines Ultimatums ließen Taliban-Kämpfer heute Morgen eine französische Geisel frei. Gestern erst hatte Frankreich laut über einen Abzug seiner Truppen aus Afghanistan nachgedacht. Beam me up. Scotty fliegt jetzt für immer durchs All. Der letzte Wunsch des Chefingenieurs von Raumschiff Enterprise ging heute in Erfüllung. Von einer Raketenabschussrampe in New Mexico wurde die Asche des verstorbenen Schauspielers James Doohan ins All geschossen. Freunde und Enterprise-Fans winkten ihm ein letztes Mal nach. Doohan war vor knapp 2 Jahren im Alter von 85 Jahren gestorben.
Zwischenfall gegeben. Bei der Landung riss das vordere Fahrwerk eines Tornados ab. Pilot und Co-Pilot blieben unverletzt. Die Gründe für die Bruchlandung sind noch nicht klar. Die 6 Kampfflugzeuge sind im Norden Afghanistans in Mazar-e Sharif stationiert. Sie unterstützen mit Aufklärungsflügen die internationale Schutztruppe im Kampf gegen die radikal-islamischen Taliban. Viele befürchten schon jetzt massive Ernteausfälle. Der frühe Vorgeschmack auf den Sommer hat aber durchaus auch seine schönen Seiten.
22 Grad schon morgens um 10 Uhr. Der perfekte Saisonauftakt im Strandbad Wannsee. Direkt vor den Toren Berlins tanken die Sonnenanbeter auf. Ein Gefühl wie ein Sommer am Mittelmeer. Dabei ist doch eigentlich erst Frühling.
Es ist unglaublich, oder? Es ist heute wie ein Tag Urlaub im Sommer. Ja, ich finde es wunderbar.
Es soll der wärmste April seit mehr als 100 Jahren sein, sagen die Meteorologen. Heute war es jedenfalls heiß genug für eine Abkühlung im 14 Grad kalten Wasser. Auch 600 Kilometer weiter südlich im bayerischen Utting brannte die Sonne vom Himmel. So manchem Camper wurde es fast schon wieder zu heiß. Ein Plätzchen im Schatten und ein kühles Getränk, beides hoch begehrt.
Das ist ein April fantastisch. Wir genießen das in vollen Zügen.
Die Sonne ist zwar kräftig, aber wenn man sie einschmiert, dann kann man schon aushalten.
Kein Tropfen Regen bedeutet aber auch wenig Wasser im nahegelegenen See. Bald vielleicht zu wenig. Und so ist der Klimawandel trotz der fröhlichen Urlaubsstimmung ein Thema am Picknicktisch.
Also man macht sich natürlich bei dem tollen Frühlingswetter, das wir jetzt hier haben, schon Gedanken, wie das weitergeht, wenn jetzt der Sommer noch heißer wird, ob da nicht tatsächlich das Wasser auch knapper wird.
Noch ist genug vom kühlen Nass da. Zumindest für ein Bad in der guten alten Wanne reicht es. Derart ausgestattet bringt der Wochenend-Kurzurlaub bestimmt ausreichend Erholung.
The white cliffs of Dover, Martin, could be the plains of Dover,
They're
shaken
still
hard.
standing. They're still standing. But you're right, actually, Stephen. The southeast of England hit by a moderate earthquake and picked up on the seismograph behind me by the British Geological Survey. And we have some shots to show you of one area that was hit particularly hard, actually, probably the hardest hit here. Folkestone in Kent in the southeast of England here. There were, in fact, reports of structural damage, chimney pots quite badly affected, some even crashing down into streets, and power lines also brought down as well. We know of one person that was injured. No serious injuries to report so far, I'm glad to say. Of course, moderate quakes like this, quite common around other parts of the world, but not so common in the United Kingdom. We have to go back to 2002 for the last moderate quake, and that hit the English Midlands, in fact, Dudley in the English Midlands back in late 2002. We will keep you posted on any developments, but those white cliffs are certainly still standing. We have more weather to bring you, of course, across the region, and certainly for Folkestone as they continue to assess the damage from that earthquake. The weather conditions are actually very fine. We're dealing with very warm temperatures across much of Central and Western Europe. I think to an extent those temperatures being knocked down a little bit on Sunday. We do have some quite thundery weather working its way up from the south. So in Paris, for example, you will see some showers, and I think those showers will also be working their way. You can just see them clipping in to that southeastern corner of England later on Sunday. Madrid also seeing rain, Barcelona. And actually watch that area of rain because it's on the move, and by Monday it will be pushing across the western Mediterranean into southern Italy. So if you're watching us in Rome, I think rain will be developing by the time we get to Monday.
The remains of actor James Doohan, who played Scotty on the television series Star Trek for so many years, have gone to the edge of space and back. We could say boldly gone. Hundreds of people were cheering as his ashes and those of about 200 other people hurtled to the edge of space on board this small rocket. Missile away, they said, as it launched. It later separated into parts and returned to Earth. The capsules holding the remains were borne back on parachutes. This is the first successful launch from Spaceport America, which is a commercial spaceport being developed right now in the deserts of New Mexico. We've been asking our viewers what they think of families spending money to have someone's ashes sent into space, and we've had a lot of responses to this. Lovely from Manila wrote, not only is it a waste of money, but something impractical as well. Why not send the ashes to a space museum or other related place instead? John says, though, the big surprise to me is that it seems to be extremely affordable. The cost for that was a little less than $500. If I can find someone to send my ashes to the cosmos, I look forward to doing it. We'd like to hear from you on this subject as well. Weigh in on our question of the day. If you chose cremation, what would you like done with your ashes? Space or seaside, whatever. Would you send them into space? Would you have them scattered on top of Mount Everest or across the ocean? Let us know, please, by sending email to yourviews@cnn.com.
Ein Spaziergang auf der Elbe bei Dresden, besser gesagt auf dem Grund der Elbe, denn Wasser ist nicht mehr viel da. Der Pegel ist in den vergangenen Wochen dramatisch gesunken. Am Wochenende soll er nur noch bei 1,5 Meter liegen. Normal ist er über 2 Meter hoch. Noch fahren Schiffe, aber vielleicht nicht mehr lange. Und auch die Bauern haben mit der Trockenheit zu kämpfen. Hochsommer im April und kein Regen. Da kann die Saat, wie hier südlich von Freiburg, nicht gedeihen.
Wenn Sie hier auf den hinter uns liegenden Feld schauen, da wäre normalerweise das Getreide mittlerweile kniehoch, sogar vielleicht hüfthoch. Und man sieht, es kommt gerade aus dem Boden heraus.
In ganz Deutschland drohen die Wälder zu brennen. Besonders schlimm trifft es Brandenburg. Der sandige Boden hat kaum Feuchtigkeit gespeichert. Außerdem stehen hier vor allem Nadelbäume, die sehr leicht brennen. Wochenend und Sonnenschein, das beschreibt eher das Lebensgefühl am Wannsee. Heute wurde hier die Badesaison eröffnet, viele Wochen früher als sonst.
So einen April habe ich, wie gesagt, seit 36 Jahren nicht erlebt. Also dass am ersten Eröffnungstag überhaupt Wärmegrade bis 27 Grad sind. Sowas habe ich hier noch nicht erlebt. Wir haben hier schon Anfang Mai, sind wir hier noch mit einem Schneeschieber rumgerannt.
Auch in Braunschweig wurde heute schon im Freien gebadet. Und in den nächsten Tagen wird die Lust auf Abkühlung bleiben, denn die Sonne soll weiter scheinen.